Yeah, you're gonna, it's kind of nice in the sense to wear that reverse engineering hat. You're like, wow, look how they did this.
Yeah.
Why did they do that? And you'll start finding all kinds of stuff. And not to curse anything, but someday maybe you'll look in the motor, right? And you'll take it.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, look at this.
Yeah.
On a quick little tangent to that. So my original car, the original engine for my car came out of ProDrive.
Okay.
And so it was done for Group N. So, and I had toured ProDrive. The first time I toured ProDrive was in 2007. So it was kind of the hats off tour. They showed me all the cheats that they used to do in WRC back in the day. Like, I used to do this thing. Like, they did this bit in the back with in the trunk, they'd actually stack 3 trunk liners because they were trying to get a weight balance in the car, but that was illegal. Huh. So they found a secret way to do that. But I remember the ProDrive engine that I had when I took it apart for Group N, so you can't run adjustable pulleys in Group N. So the Discovery, you know what ProDrive did? They took the pins out of the cams, the alignment pin, pulled them out, and then they clocked the cam to get the cam advance, and then they just torqued the bolt back on. So there wasn't any, they relied on torque and that friction surface, but they got, cam advance. So they did about, a couple degrees of cam advance on the intake cams. Like, wow, look at just all these fun little things.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, yeah, you might have some Easter eggs in there.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Well, you guys.
I tell you what Easter egg we didn't find is that thing is definitely a helical limited slip in the rear.
Oh.
No fancy dips in the rear.
Yeah. Well, at least now.
Now, currently, yeah.
It doesn't still have the dog box in it, does it?
No, I don't think so. It seemed like it was. It looks like it's just like a bone stock Spec C version 9 transmission.
Okay.
Is what we're thinking.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, you guys ready to start?
I am. Is Jeanette coming on? I don't even know.
I don't think so for this one. I think she's going to be on for the next one.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, yes.
You guys in the same place?
Scotty and I are.
Kind of. I mean, it's a big facility.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Gotcha.
Ryan is in his mobile office.
That's right.
All right, well, let's kick this thing off. So this is episode 22 of the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. So today we've got with us Ryan from DSX, Tasso from OTC Racing. We've got maybe a new face to the podcast, Victor from DM Rally.
Hi, guys.
So.
Hi, Victor.
Yes. And for this episode, what we want to do is so Brian, you just got back from running a Super Lap Battle at COTA. And so we want to talk about that. Let's see. And Scotty, I'm going to mute you to see if we can get that echo under control there. That sounds better. So Scotty, if you want to talk, just unmute yourself. Cool. So yeah, before we get rolling, just want to say, thanks to everybody for listening and watching. Really appreciate your time and your support. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you can. Leave us a review on iTunes. That'd be awesome. And let's get into it here. So Ryan, first off, let's talk about what car you brought to Super Lap Battle this time around.
Okay, so this year, as a little change up, we brought out the Super Taikyu car that we've talked about briefly in the past out there, and essentially it's Taikyu trim. We didn't do anything crazy with tunes or anything, just put the proper fuel in it and got it where it would actually drive for more than 5 minutes.
So, and maybe just talk a little bit about, because I think we touched on it, geez, I can't remember, maybe 2 episodes ago, but just kind of some of the last minute things you had to do to get the car to the point where you were ready to take it out to Super Lap.
We did, now, that's enough, honey. Anyway, so we did, the cooling system was having issues. So with the cooling system, we did, had to do the radiator, had to do the water pump, had to do basically just like a quick coolant overhaul. We started with the coolant, and then it didn't have a thermostat when we took it apart. And then we started with, from there we moved to the water pump and saw that the water pump, there's nothing like really obvious to it other than it being pretty hella corroded. And I was like, well, we really need to dive into this radiator. We took the radiator out, and that thing probably weighed 25, 30 pounds with just sediment and junk like in it.
Whoa.
So made an emergency pit stop to the blue WRX, yanked a couple of cooling products off of it and got that going. And we talked about a little bit about how I was waiting for foam and stuff for fuel safe. We got foam in it. We put foam in, packed the tank and everything. Everything was looking good there. We went and did a couple of test runs where the car was trying to overheat, like after one lap. And when I had the car jacked up doing the timing and stuff, all the fuel was basically leaking out of the fuel cell. So we also had to find an emergency fuel cell to run in the car to do the event. So
Wow.
that was literally all finished the day that we towed the car out of here to Dakota. So it was super, super nuts, super crazy, per the usual last minute. But fortunately, those are the only two main issues we had to deal with.
Nice. Well, and it sounds like you got it resolved so that once you got to Dakota, you were able to kind of run the car kind of as you would want or without any kind of concern.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Nice. Well, we'll talk a little bit about what was your experience kind of running that car versus the blue car for the last couple of years.
So the blue car has very much been a car that we've built. We've all worked together to kind of build a car that with the feel that I like, and it's been like it is so different. It just handles so different. Turn-in's a lot different. Everything's so different in the car, but the biggest thing from the driving difference, I mean, between the two cars is how different they feel. I mean, very little aero versus substantially more aero, way less power versus more power. And I mean, and the weight was a big difference too. And tires were pretty much the same, but I mean, the two cars just in feel were like driving two different Subarus. I mean, they weren't like driving, two completely different cars, but definitely than two different Subarus.
Sure.
But I mean, I think the biggest thing, and this is something we were kind of open for, is that the people who know us and know the blue car were excited to see us out, the past couple of years of Super Lap. But with the yellow car, I mean, no one had to care who I was. Like literally we're rolling the yellow car out. I mean, and you couldn't move the car without getting bombarded by photographers, which is pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool.
So it definitely brought a lot of heritage with it to that race. And it ended up being as big of a deal as we were hoping it would be. So.
Hey,
Nice.
Ryan.
Yeah.
How'd you feel with right-hand drive?
It took me a little bit to get used to it, but it almost feels like it's a cheater mode, like so many of the tracks are clockwise in the US. And I don't know what it is about like being on the left side of the car. You don't really you look out and you don't really think about looking out and seeing stuff. But when you're on the right-hand side of the car, you're like, wow, that's right where the car's supposed to be. And, and it's super nuts. And that the shifting, I mean, it definitely that was the hardest part was the shifting. But fortunately, I was worried about money shifting, going from like fourth to third on accident instead of fourth to fifth. But I think the hardest thing I had actually was downshifting. A lot of times, I'd be in fifth and downshift in the fourth. And then when I'd go to downshift in the third, I'd upshift in the fifth. And I was like, no. So, I mean, fortunately, as far as the shifting goes, those are the only kind of the shifting issues we had. But, being, diligent and not trying to overthink it, because I think that's what used to get me before. You're like, oh my God, it's 6, and you're like trying so hard to get in the 6. I think just letting it happen naturally wasn't too bad.
This left hand is just not too smart for us Americans.
No.
It takes some training, but it's awesome because you drive it like a granny, like I got this, right? And then you're doing 10 tenths.
Yeah.
And it's like a whole new universe of driving. But yeah, that sense of the car, the depth perception, it's just fun to watch. So man, I'm excited I'm curious to what benefit it gives a driver to really be proficient with left hand and right hand drive. Like you're now being put on the other side of the car, and your body and space is getting like the most like beneficial like comprehension of your car.
Yeah.
From knowing it, because the chassis for the most part, you drove it on the other side of the other car, and now you're on this side. Just both the best worlds, perhaps. So
I'm hoping that you get used to like that spatial awareness of like where the edges of the car are. But it's funny when you look at how a car, like when you look at your line, like man, I was so far off to the, I had so much more space on the right side of the car. Now it's kind of like the opposite. And like you're saying, if I can get good at both sides, you kind of get like a better idea of like really how big or how narrow the car is.
Did you have trouble hitting your apexes on, I guess, maybe left-handers? Like just because you're sitting on the wrong side, did it just feel off for a bit?
Hey, is
I
that
think,
your wrong side or our right side?
Yeah, I don't know.
What I was sitting on the right hand side of the car, you know, I think if anything, and a couple of pictures will show this, you know, there's definitely a couple of, I mean, there's a lot of big turtles there. And there's a big turtle right at the end of turn one, and I overbroke. And this is kind of, you know, we were only able to get two laps at speed with the fuel cell because the fuel cell was so small. So at the end of basically the start of my third lap, I'm kind of coming in like, all right, well, let's just get around the track and get back into the pits. And I turned in a little early, you know, because the speed and everything wasn't there. And you talk about that spatial awareness, and I hit that huge turtle that's on the inside of turn one, and it popped the car up. And I just remember being in the car like, wow, that was a lot. I hope the photographer got that. And then, you know, guys are coming out of paddocks like, you got to see this. This is nuts. You know, like you could see the right side, the inside of the right side, side skirt. So it's like,
wow.
There was a couple moments where you're not paying attention like as diligently as you should, and you would just drive over random stuff without even expecting it.
Man, I think I think we've seen a picture of that where the car is just like way up on two wheels. So
yeah.
Well, that just means you're gonna have to like keep practicing and go back there again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or center drive.
Center drive.
There we go.
Yes.
That
would be awesome. Yes.
The Japanese driving position is so different compared to like how I've set the car up, my blue car up. Like I like to sit back with a little bit of a rake, but nothing too crazy, you know, where your knees are just like slightly lifted in the front of the seat, and you're kind of going, you know, almost straight legged at the pedals and the wheel and everything. And the way this car was, I mean, it's literally like you're sitting in a recliner. It wasn't just like a little bit reclined. It's like, it's a lot. And when you're sitting in, you're like, wow, like you feel like you're in a Formula car. Like you're really sitting deep in the car. And even the Hans, like the Hans is pushed up against the back of the seat and stuff. Like there's a noticeable angle difference versus like with the way that they set the cars up versus the way we set ours up. I mean, the steering wheel was lowered. It's got like 1.5 inch spacers on it. It's extended out. Your feet are like, I mean, it's almost like they're laying on the floorboard of the car, and then the dash is pulled down, and you really look like a little kid driving this thing where you literally look out to the side, and it's like your visor's like almost level with with the window. You're like, wow, this is like super nuts, you know, to drive it.
So, I mean, it sounds like they really did a lot deliberately to lower the driving seat position. And like they lowered the dash?
The dash is, you can see, I mean, and it was something that I didn't even really catch when I first started looking at the car, but one of my buddies pointed out, you know, you can see in the door cards where the edge of the dash is like notched, you know, in the door card, and you can see how much it's pulled down from the door card, how much the whole dash is drooped down. And I mean, it still meets up with everything on like the apron side up against the windshield, but all the stuff has been chopped. So like the original bolts that go into the side of it to hold it to like the bracket and stuff, all that stuff is completely lopped off, and it's literally just holes drilled into it, and the whole dash is pulled down. So it's super weird, super wild.
Lowering the center of gravity though.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and even sitting in the car, like looking at the pictures, you see how much further back you are in the car, and that goes with like that weight reduction too. I mean, that weight distribution too. You were even that 2 inches, and when you're a big boy like me, you know, at 220 pounds, 2 or 3 inches further forward and a little bit higher in the car definitely probably adds up. Yeah, it makes a difference.
Wild. Well, let's talk about results a little bit.
Okay.
You'd sent, I guess it's probably your best lap from this year and then the last 2 years.
Right.
I think we've all had a chance to kind of look at that, but let's maybe talk about what your best lap time was this year, and then kind of some of what your takeaways are of the differences between this year with the yellow car and the last 2 years with the blue car.
Right.
Well, and before you begin, do they both, the new car and the old car, both have the same gearing? Is it the JDM short 5.6?
It is, yeah. It's the only difference is it's got the 1.1 to 1 transfer gear and like the 345 or 354 final drive, but the gearing seemed pretty much identical.
You had a power band too. You had the 8,000.
Yeah, and I was doing 7,500 before, but yeah, I mean, you're going to $8,000 is where the rev limiter was somewhere between 7,700 and 8,000, depending on how froggy the car was feeling in that moment. But yeah, it was definitely that 8,000, that little bit longer power band, and a different turbo. I mean, I've ran a different turbo setup in every power setup on each one of the times we've been out. So I think overall this was probably as low as I'm guessing around 260 wheels, somewhere about there, as like the blue car was before on the VF34, but a lot more lively mid-range power band. Like the car definitely pulls a lot harder from say 6,500 to 8,000, whereas the VF34 was a very linear power band, like more linear, but it very peaky. Like you don't make 260 until like right at like 7,000 RPM or so. So it was a much better power band. And then of course the last year when we went, I mean, it was a big turbo, oversized turbo running a G25 660. We went there expecting 380 wheel horsepower, but we still had other problems and stuff. But you can see like that car weighed more. The blue car did the second year. Obviously it was the same weight from the first and the second year because we were caging everything. But when you look at the top speeds, and you guys have had a chance to look at it, you can tell that the first year we went out there, the car was heavy and slow on power. And then the second year was still heavy, but more power. And then this year was low power. And then I'm assuming substantially a lot less weight because not only did the car go faster and all the higher trap speeds, but it was only a little bit more than the second year we went with 380 wheel. So it's interesting to drive like every version that we've been there with. There's been just power and weight and all the stuff all over the place.
How much of a difference do you think the power band that you had this year was in ultimately like your ability to accelerate out of the corners, which might then also lead into because on almost every straight you were faster.
Yeah.
And if you really think it's down on power that much compared to last year, I mean, where did that come from?
I mean, last year we still had some problems, but you still look though. I mean, it was only like a 2 mile/hour difference on the top end, so it wasn't like a huge gap in speed. Whereas you look at it from the first year where the power is probably like the number anyway was closer. It was like a 10+ mile/hour difference, like a 15 mile/hour difference on the backstretch. So I definitely think that the car didn't feel like it didn't have downforce. It felt slippery. It felt planted. But the power band was like, it wasn't explosive. It was still pretty linear, but it seemed like with the AVCS, because this is the first motor I've ever had with AVCS, like it felt like as long as you were on the go pedal, that thing was pulling pretty hard. It was never like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like when we went to Road America last year with, all the power and the aero and the weight reduction. But it was like, yeah, this is definitely more power than the first year, but not as like intense as the second year, like not as explosive on the top end, but very like meaty. And you didn't have to be like, I don't know. I still shifted quite a bit, probably more than I probably needed to, but like in the S's is where you really noticed it, because in the S's you're going in and like in the first year, obviously learning the track, but you kind of keep the RPM and the speeds up. But and then the second year, you definitely had to really like. There was still lag, even though the G20 is fast. There was still lag because it's such a big turbo. But this year, I mean, it was literally like driving in, fifth gear matted. Oh, we hit a little brake zone, fifth gear again. Like normally I would have downshifted the fourth, then a tighter spot, fourth gear matted, power. It was just like it had power. I didn't have to shift down as much in the S's, and I think that was like a huge improvement. Just being able to I felt like I was just floating through the S's. Like it was scary, almost like felt like you're in warp speed, just crazy. And that was, I think, where the power band that it had with the VF36 and the twin scroll and stuff made the biggest difference. Is I didn't have to shift as much there, so I could literally focus on the line and where I was going. and driving on two wheels through the S's was just totally wild.
Sure.
I noticed that when I used to run a VF36, it was the same kind of thing. It didn't matter as long as I was at more than 3,000 RPM.
Mm-hmm.
It had all the power I wanted. It's a really good turbo, and the twin scroll just widens that power band so much. I think it was cool.
And the AVCS helps motor it and everything too. I mean, it was so good.
I'm curious. Some of your top speed differences, your lap time increases. Do you think that was that area under the curve that we've been talking about, or do you think you had some better corner exit speed stuff with some of the suspension geometry changes? I mean, if you're talking about hauling through the S's, that can be cornering as much as it is a power band meet thing, right? So I think that's a factor.
I definitely think cornering was a big part of it. So you guys didn't see it in the data and stuff, but I've run GPS. I ran the same tablet for the first 2 years, and then of course a phone like with a pretty solid windshield mount this last year. And one of the things I noticed looking at the data was that in the first 2 years with a car, like at least mechanically, like suspension wise, is pretty much the same. The car was doing like peak G's of like 1.5 to 1.51 left to right with easily sustained G's in the 1.3 range. This year, I mean, just absolutely bonkers on a smaller tire than it was on last year, because I was a 245 this year ad band, but a 255 last year. We were getting 1.98 peak Gs with 1.7 G sustained. And that is a huge increase. I mean, and you talk about like, is it a little bit of this or a little bit of that? I mean, that is definitely a major contributor for sure. The tightest turn on the track, which is the one just before the backstretch, you can see that the car pushes at low speed stuff. And that's the tightest turn of the track. And you can tell, like, I had to slow down more just to make that turn. But that's where the power band helps. I mean, it's literally, as soon as I get back on it, it's really lively and ready to go. And that 2 or 3 miles an hour is slower, having a brake going into that turn or whatever. We were easily able to make that up and more on the backstretch with, the lack of aero and just the power band out of the hole with no lag.
So you're saying in this car with a slightly narrower tire, but no downforce, basically, like definitely nothing up front, and that wing in the back, I mean, do you think that does much? I mean, maybe a little something?
It does a little something. It definitely is right up there with the JDM hotness and hot boy looks for sure. But it can't be much though. I mean, you look at the spoiler that they have on the Spoon car, which is kind of built in the same era. They have basically the same profile, just lower, like shorter uprights. So I can't imagine it's super crazy.
So even with, go ahead, Victor.
Did you drive the car as is? Did it change at all from Japan, or have you gone through any of the suspension config? Have you corner balanced the car? Do you know any of the weights around it, or was it just get in the car and feel it out? There were marks on the shock adjustments that you could tell that they liked where they were at. They were not on those settings, and we didn't change that. We didn't change anything in the suspension. We didn't change anything with the alignment. The car was originally built, around the Dunlop Dereza slicks back in 2005. Tire technology has come so far in the last 15 years, and these Yokohama Advan AO52s, they're right up there with the most grip of any tire I've ever driven on. And so I would say it's probably fairly comparable maybe to those slicks, because those slicks were probably set up for endurance like lifespan as well. So we didn't change anything. We didn't even check anything. Like, we've had the car for about 6 weeks, and when we actually took it out on track, we're like, oh my God, it's overheating. Like, oh no, this is happening. Oh no, that's happening. So like a big part of the prep, like the only prep work that we actually did leading into that weekend was just trying to make sure the car could actually go for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. Yeah, man, I look forward to see the report of the not the autopsy, but the kind of
physical exam.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You guys stuff there, and it'd be cool just to see how that compares, and then maybe even do the same thing with your old car. That, you know, you have all the racing specs on here with the track data. That's awesome, man. And it'd be neat to have that one-to-one comparison. Like, hey, here's the two cars.
Yeah.
And here's these invisible things we didn't see, and then how does that translate to what you felt? Because it's neat stuff to hear.
What's super interesting to me is the fact that with no downforce, you're pulling significantly more cornering G's than without. And like, I remember you saying that like it did not appear to have a lot of caster up front, but they're running what you thought was a crazy amount of camber.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, obviously now it's even more clear that there's really something going on with the setup of the yellow car.
Yeah.
And so if you can figure out what the specific details, what the special sauce is there, and apply it to the blue car.
Yeah.
And then sell it.
And then what?
And then sell it.
Then sell it, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part too, like talking about that's like, if I drive in the car, if I drove the car without any data, I would be like, okay, I need to change this aspect of it. And then I would probably change it, and it might make it feel better to me, but it might make it worse. And that could be what the blue car is. The blue car is so much of like this ideology of like how it should be. We are working with a lot of limitations that somehow the Japanese were able to get around. You know, like the amount of camera that they have in that car is like, with all the stuff that we have done to my car, that we're not even like, we're close, but we're not that close, you know? And so that's why I don't really want to change too much about the way it is, but I want to figure out, okay, like what works, but maybe change. I'm okay with this feel change in the blue car, like maybe a little bit less caster to get even more camber gain, you know, really see what I can do to put into that car. The only downside is that the blue car is really taking this like really nightmarish, that's awesome, but really crazy turn with the big tires, you know, and comparing the two is going to be tough. But, you know, I'm conscious that like I can feel a difference. I can understand like once we see like Victor was saying, you know, get us physical, like even when we put it on an alignment rack, maybe it's got a lot more caster than we even know because of changes that they've changed, you know, but, you know, put it on there and see what it is. We know what the blue car is alignment wise, get it weighed, get it dynoed, just see what the power band even looks like. I mean, those things are going to answer a lot of questions about the science of speed behind the car and driving it. Another thing to take into consideration too is COTA is not one of those tracks you get to practice. You know, it's really not one of those tracks that translates well, in my opinion, from like sims and stuff where you can't feel the elevation change. You go over the rumble strip and there's still so much grip out there. It's just insane. And so this is like a whole other year of driving on top of that to add to it. And and I think that's also part of it, contributing to the speed, especially in the S's. Like when I drove the blue car on the 315s, it was scary. And then I got a fire under me to like really set that lap record, that class record for NCM. And I just drove through the terror. And you go through this crazy high level, and then you back it down a little bit to where like the yellow car is, and it's not like, that's not scary at all. Like, oh, cool, we're just like flying through this stuff, whatever happens, you know? And so I definitely think that like a whole other year of driving on top of that has definitely helped as well.
Let me ask you, and this is going to sound kind of random or ethereal or something. How much do you think you had a lot of positive vibes on the weekend, right? A lot of positive kind of psychological space. How much do you think that played into, I mean, it sounded like you were having fun in the car, you know, and whereas you're just saying you were scared at, you know, on your blue car with the big tires, right? So how much do you think that psychological component, that headspace aspect affected how fast you drove?
I think it's kind of twofold answer. One is like there's a lot more confidence going back there, knowing how much grip the track has, knowing how much runoff room there is. Like, I'm not scared. There's not like at NCM, the walls are close. It's a technical track, and the way that the car was behaving, because it's not optimized, obviously, it was really pointing me at a lot of walls, and I didn't like that. But going to COTA, when you know there's a ton of runoff, all the engineering has been thought out, and I don't know if you guys know or not. I think some of you guys do, but the listeners might not. I only drove half the sessions. Nick Stennerfer drove the other half of the sessions. So it kind of put like from even like a mechanical sympathy aspect. I did not drive that car thinking, oh my God, I don't want to break this fragile little egg. I drove that car like, I'm going to fucking just like, this is crazy. Like, I just couldn't, like, there was like the red mist of like excitement and fun and anger driving the car like that. You can't do 8 sessions all day to any car really. So it was kind of nice because I got to drive those 4 sessions in the car as hard as I wanted it to, but without necessarily worrying. Like, Nick still drove the car hard, don't get me wrong. He was trying to beat my time and he was trying to beat his time, but he had the mechanical sympathy. Like, I don't want to be the one that breaks it. I don't want to be the one that gets charged as fee, for track cleanup. I don't want to be the one that, like, on camera, that I'm the one responsible for tearing and breaking this thing or wrecking this thing. So the car got all the love all weekend.
He'd never live it down.
Yeah. He got all the love. The car got all the love the weekend with the screen time and making it out to every session and all that stuff. And I got to basically cherry pick, okay, this is the session I want to drive. This is the session I want to drive. This is going to be a fast session. So I only drove, and kind of mentally, like, I knew going into those sessions, these are going to be optimal conditions. Let's push this car and let's do it. Instead of going into like the last session of the day, I knew it was the hottest session. I knew it was going to be ideal. And then once it didn't happen, I'm like, it's not going to happen. But driving overheating. Like at that, well, not just overheating, just with the tires, the track conditions, and all that stuff. Driving that 8:40 in the morning session on Sunday, I knew, like, okay, this is going to be like probably the best session. Then I put my big boy hat on and went out there and just put down 2 fast laps for the car. And so from a mental game, it's safer. It's a safer track. It's, people are excited to actually see what it can do. And I want to prove that not only can this car do great things, but I can do great things with it as well. And so from a mental space, I mean, there was definitely a push and kind of that relaxation with Nick driving it half the time as well.
It seems like there's some real wisdom, or just it worked out really well to kind of go into it blind, kind of like as Victor was alluding to, and just explore the car. Like, don't come into it and think you have to change everything. You got into that car and you just like, all right, let's see what this thing does. Let's see what this thing can do. Let's explore. And then you found out it can do. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, you got the alien spaceship, man, and it landed in your yard. Like, what does this even do? The aliens know some cool things.
Yeah.
Let's understand it a lot before you even change it. So I'd encourage that, man. Leave that thing alone for a while, because you got some fun stuff to report back on. I think that everyone out there is interested in, like, there's science, like you said, behind it, and it's not cutting edge, that thing. It's kind of bleeding edge. There's wizardry going on there.
Yeah.
So, yourself, just like Tasso pointed out, man, the feels of that's such an important psychological component. You probably went in, when you have to start watching gauges and you're worrying about the car and all these other aspects, you're not focused on driving. You're out like, oh, I hope it doesn't blow up.
Yeah. Well, and to have the confidence that this is a car that it was built to run like 24 hours endurance and be reliable and fast, and it won. Yeah. And then once you get out there and you work through the cooling and the fueling issues, and you realize, no, this thing is actually solid. All right, now let's push.
Yeah.
It's a great result.
It would have been nice to have been able to do actually more than 2 laps. That was definitely a downside. But really, the fueling thing really only cost us 1 more flying lap. I don't think that we would have got 2 more out of it with just the time allotment that there was. But it would have been nice to have that last lap. So, like, for example, when I ran my fastest time, I caught insane traffic after the backstretch. And so my whole second sector time, or my second half of the track, I mean, it's slow compared to even the one before it. But then knowing that the 27s were there, a low 27 was there in the car, if I would have had the ability for that 3rd lap, I would have had the confidence to just, okay, like, we're in traffic, let's back off. We know what kind of potential it is. Let's set it up and go. And it was more like, okay, like, this isn't going to be the 27.3 that I'm looking at potentially here, but this is going to beat my 29 flat that I just ran just last lap. And so having that 3rd, knowing that I could have done like that 3rd or that next lap, that would have been a nice add-on. But it probably is partly what kind of helped the car too. I mean, it literally only got beat on for 6 minutes at a time, like,
Right.
which is for, you know, Subarus are, we don't know how unreliable or reliable this car may be, but we do know that like most anything is going to be able to hack it for 6 minutes. So
A 50-50 chance of car surviving. It will do very good.
yeah, much better.
Well,
exactly.
and to be fair, you're waking this thing up from sitting for how many years? I mean, this is really like its first real like track use again in probably a number of years. So
yeah,
you gotta wake it up easy.
yeah, wake it up easy.
Have you looked at what it's going to take to get the fuel cell fixed? Can that thing be patched and repaired? Does it just need a new bladder?
New bladder, yeah.
Just get a new bladder for it. I mean, getting a new bladder made for it, I'm sure it's going to be pricey, but it's probably going to be around $600, which is still cheaper than a regular fuel cell. Like we were looking at fuel cells, like what was available in Colorado. Like step one, what can I get in the next 2 hours so we can get this car on the trailer in 4? And the options we had were a $300 drag cell, like an 8-gallon drag tank, which is what we got that drag tank, and there's no baffling. There's one pickup. It's the bare minimum. And literally we took the foam that I had in that 40-gallon tank. We stuffed about half of that inside this 8-gallon cell to try and control the sloshage at least a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the other option was an $800 E36 spare tire drop-in that may or may not have worked, but it would have been SFI certified, but it would only been 12 gallons instead of 8. So it might have given us that extra lap or two, but it also was going to be probably more than what it costs to get a new bladder made that's going to be SFI certified for the next 5 years, which is already a direction we were going to go anyway.
So just a quick footnote on that. We've actually run into that ourselves here with the Pikes Peak car. It's just something that never clicked, is that the bladders in the fuel cells, they have to be replaced. And they have a designated life. And we realized or discovered that actually we were getting close to the end of the life of the original bladder in the Pikes Peak car. Plus, they have different materials with gasoline or ethanol.
Right.
And so they say if you're going to run ethanol in with a bladder that's made for gasoline, it shortens life by half.
Yeah.
That's one of our intents is to switch over to E85. So we just had to order a new bladder as well.
Yeah, bladder and the blue foam instead of the yellow foam, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, cool. Well, I guess let's just kind of finalize and just kind of explain what the end all result was. So what class were you running in? And I think over your shoulder you've got a little hint at what the ultimate result was. But just kind of maybe just kind of tell us what the final result came to.
So we did the final result was second place in Pro Comp. It was definitely a tough battle for first. We had first the first day. The car that did win Pro Comp is basically a Miata with a carbon Volkswagen body on top of it with a big giant turbo S2000 engine and drivetrain in it. So very aggressive
huge
car.
aero.
Yeah, huge aero. And we talked with Justin Bayless, and Justin basically came up to me halfway through that he ran like a 26.4 or 26.6. I'm like, all right, like that's a lot faster than I've already been, but that's attainable. Let me try. And then Justin went and ran a 25.2 in like the worst conditions of the day. Like that car has got so much potential. It was awesome to see it actually go that much faster. But he came up and told me halfway through the second day, he was like, dude, when you ran 29s in the first day, it woke me up. Like I was like, what am I doing? I need to go faster. We got to figure this out. We got to figure this track out. We got to get the car going. And that's like me running, breaking the 30s, which is something a Pro Comp didn't do last year or the year before, was what pushed him to really like, okay, there's something that we need to do, and they're kind of been in their own little isolated bubble, with all the other cars and stuff going on. And so that pushed them to run even faster. I was talking to one of the guys who was working for me, Kyle Beck, and he was saying like literally when that car would get pointed straight on the front stretch, that car was lighting up the rear tires. The thing was putting down so much power. And so it's cool. It sucks I got second. It would have been awesome to actually have won first, but it's really awesome knowing that I was able to like shift the whole attitude of that Pro Comp to like, okay, okay, this isn't just some cute little exhibition class where we got old retired Japanese race cars. Like, this is a class that we want to be taken serious too, and we're going to go faster. And it was awesome to actually see like that growth of the class literally right in front of us and be responsible for it.
That's cool.
So yeah, second place, we'll take it.
Absolutely.
Not too bad for a first showing. And to be, 5 seconds faster than I went last year with 100 less horsepower is just absolutely incredible. So
yeah,
that spoon Accord that was out there, do you think that, was that basically do you think there was more time in that?
Yeah. He was running like 240, 241s. They did bring some 005s out with them, like the true slicks. And after the first day, I was like, all right, man, like, I'm not going to catch you on Advans. I'm going to go to the slicks. And they end up breaking an axle with the slick on the first session. So they went back to the Advans to just try and preserve the car for kind of like our cute little thing we got to do at the end of the day, which was fucking awesome.
Which was super cool. Absolutely.
Super cool. And but as far as like, I think the car could have went faster. There's definitely he's doing the same thing I'm doing. Like, I'm on the original suspension. They're still on their original Ohlins. And so there's a lot, probably they've actually been beating on their car for the last couple of years. Whereas like we've literally like blew the dust off the dashboard, did a fuel tank and a radiator, and literally started driving this thing after it's been sitting for 15 years. So I think there's potential for more time in that car, but it does look like it probably needs a little bit more love. Like, he's got just so much rear wheel lift and a lot of other things, I think those two cars probably in its day, they probably weren't even in the same class. I feel like a big part of it's like the wheel width that they were factory running. Their wheels are like an 8-inch wide wheel instead of I'm on a 9.5-inch wide wheel, and that's how the car was set up. Their cage is obviously, their whole car is built for American racing, which is awesome. Even though it was a spoon built car. But I think even like the power and everything, even though they're like similar in that regard, the yellow car is definitely a faster in general car than their spoon car was. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I still think there's time in it for sure. But
Nice.
we're also trying not to break these things. Well,
yeah,
he's not.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and the racing was just like, of all the things, I was telling this to Jeanette, like, even getting second place, it still exceeded this was still like 11 out of 10 event. Every time we opened the garage door, or every time the car moved, or any time that the car was on track, or any time that like in the paddocks, I was doing autographs, giving away. We gave out 700 stickers this weekend.
Oh,
like,
man.
it was just insane, like,
that's awesome.
And it was like the driving was its one experience, and being there with the car was like this, kind of like I was saying earlier, it was like this entirely different experience. Like, we got there, Nick Stennifer trailered the car down for us, which is super nice. So I wasn't stressed at all in the RV, just booking down here, 70 in the RV was nice. But like when we got here and Nick got here, they unloaded his car. The car was in there. We're literally walking in the trailer, and I look over my shoulder, and there's photographers. I get that, cars are moving and stuff in the paddock and stuff. But Larry Chen was there. Larry Chen was in this group of photographers waiting for the car to come out. And I remember talking to Kyle, my pit guy. I was like, dude, Larry Chen is right outside this trailer right now, and we're getting ready to pull this car out here. Like, that was just nuts to me. And that kind of attention, the car got that attention the entire weekend. We did an hopefully it turns into an autofocus interview with Larry Chen, where we talked about the car. His photographers took a ton of pictures. They put some of their cameras in my car for in-car footage. And hopefully that turns into an actual awesome autofocus on Larry Chen and the Hoonigan autofocus page. But I did an interview with PhD Racing, with Jackie Dink's channel. Just tons and tons of pictures of the car. People sending me pictures of the car, like just the amount of like live stream footage it got. People, there's a lot of people who didn't know what the car was. Like, man, what's all the hubbub with this car? And as people were explaining it, like, you were seeing like people were becoming fans of the car as they were learning about it, like in like live stream, like right then and there it was happening. Hey, so Ryan, it was, yeah.
So you got this Japanese car, You're sitting on the right-hand drive. You're getting all kinds of cool attention with it. It's got heritage. How's your Japanese, man?
Dude, terrible.
Oh, you got to learn the Japanese now, man. It's bothered with that thing.
On that last podcast we did, we were talking about all those mystery switches and all the mystery lights and stuff like that. Well, we took the dash out to do real fire suppression. We don't want any repeats, and definitely not anything with this nice of a car. So we put fire suppression in this car, and while we had the dash out, like all the labels or all the plugs are labeled in kanji. And so I'm like, this is super JDM, but if we can figure out what this is, like we can figure out what these lights do, you know, and like I'm laughing like, man, sometimes when I pull this car out, there's this like blinking green light that's just a steady. I don't know what it means. The yellow lights are flashing. I don't know what that means. There's this orange light on. I think it's your oil pressure. Don't know what that means. And so we get all this stuff out, and I send it originally to my friend Drew Turner, who spent a lot of time in Japan. He owns Def Motion in Tennessee. I'm like, hey, do you know what this stuff is? He's like, man, I know what a couple of these are. So I sent it to a way back old friend of mine, Tom Kurosaki, who I used to work with at the assembly plant at Toyota. He's like a high-end upper crust Toyota guy who goes from like plant to plant and works there for years and looks for like opportunities to fix stuff. So I sent him all those pictures. He sent them all right back to me. So that blinking green light that I thought meant like that there's trouble on the horizon or maybe one of the fuel pumps is dying, that's just a right turn signal. You know, that blue light that comes on and off, that's just your high beams. So it's kind of, I mean, it's funny how some of the lights on the dash are just like normal pedestrian lights, like stuff that like I'm thinking that they have like some critical, like we're reaching DEFCON 3, some kind of critical failure when the green lights flash. Just left the blinker on, you know, typical right-hand drive problems.
Yep.
And so we were able to figure out, you know, intercooler sprayer, means the alternator's not charging, you know, or, you know, a couple other things. And that was like actually a huge help, but not improving my Japanese, but it was really nice. And it was cool to actually like see all the kanji, like all the plugs are labeled. And I mean, everything inside there's labeled. We found like some of the switches really don't do anything. One of them's like on a serial port on the end of it. And I mean, you can see on the backside of it, like all the holes that it used to have from like all the original shit that it probably had, like for lighting, like lights and communication and who knows what, you know, and now we've got 4 mystery switches.
John, is this podcast going to have Japanese subtitles? You know how much the folks in Japan would love to see this? Like, wow, look at this guy watching one of our old cars, and he's reading the sign, and it's just a turning signal light. You know, they would get a kick out of this.
I'll have to work on that. Yeah. I'll see if we can do that. Probably not, because my Japanese is really rusty, like non-existent. But I'll try. My accent's probably so bad and so redneck, they probably wouldn't even have kanji for half the stuff that I'm even saying.
We'll have exclamation marks and questions.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, sweating emojis.
Yes, man. Well, let's segue here, because I did want to touch on a subject that kind of it's relevant to everything we've just talked about, which is what do you do when you come back from an event? Because I think so often the normal process when you come back from a racing event is you take your car, you unload it from the trailer, you push it to the back of the garage, you throw as much stuff on top of it as you can so you don't have to look at it, and just you get back to normal life and just try and get it out of your head as fast as possible. But that might not be the best way to do it.
No.
and I think after you go to an event, like there's some things you can do, some steps, some things to think about that are like to make it so that the next time you go out to the event, you're not like pulling the car to the back of the garage with 2 days to get it ready to go to the next thing.
Yeah, so we realized that we had like a leak in my tank and my washer fluid tank that does for my intercooler sprayer. So definitely things that I think everybody should be doing is giving like a general health inspection. Like make sure that you didn't just ruin those wheel bearings doing like hot boy stuff at the Circuit of the Americas.
Jump with those turtles.
So, yeah, watch out for those turtles. Yeah. You know, going through that stuff to make sure that there's nothing that's bent or broken or that needs to be replaced. I think that's a big thing. And that probably is definitely one of those overlooked things. And you see it at the paddock too. You see guys scrambling around for like brake pads after the first day, like, oh my God, we need brake pads. Who's got brake pads? Or guys who have bad ball joints and, you know, stuff that gets found in tech. all those things after you do an event are like, you should first and foremost, tech your car right off the bat. Like, I'm going to go through all the stuff that I went through to make sure this was healthy enough through tech, to make sure that it's going to be healthy enough so I don't, or replace what I need to replace when I pull it back out of the garage and pull all the, the pictures of Marilyn Monroe that I've been collecting, off the car for years.
Yeah. Well,
I think that's the first thing.
If nothing else, you should at least make a list and
Yeah.
like slowly start checking those things off. I mean, if you
For
don't
sure.
know what's wrong with it till a week before your next event, then you're scrambling. So, I mean, making a list and at least start collecting those parts, if not actually get them on.
And Victor and Tasso, you guys come from a rally background where, probably rally cars have probably one of the harder lives of any race car. And so with rally especially, like there can be things where you figure out a way to limp the car through and you make it to the finish line. But like now the work really starts to get ready for the next event. So I mean, what kind of process have you guys done to kind of like make sure that you don't just forget about something that's important that needs attention, or to start going through the car as soon as you get back, or what is your process?
For me, I mean, you joked about it, but that post-race weekend hangover is real. Like,
Yeah.
When I get home, I don't want to think about the car. Sometimes the car stays on the trailer for a day or two. I have an open trailer. So that's that first stage is really real for me. And then beyond that, I have kind of mentally 2 separate lists in my head of things that need to be fixed or checked or re-prepped, and then things that need to be improved before the next race as well. So, I mean, a lot of that's like, man, I really noticed that my brakes were horrible, or this was overheating, or I was having trouble with the, power steering pump here or there or something like that. But there's a lot of that, like, I put it off. I'm a big procrastinator in general. I don't mind. I mean, I started out, I was into cars early on because I liked working on them and stuff, but as it turned into less of a, working on it when I want to, or working to make improvements, and more like catching up with stuff that I broke on the weekend. It's just not as much fun for me. So I find that I put a lot of stuff off until it's too late, and then I scramble at the last minute to get it all ready before the next event. So, but I mean, there is some process. When I do finally get to it, I get the car up in the air, put it on stands, lay underneath it, poke around, grab everything, wiggle everything. I mean, people talk about spanner checks or bolt checks, right? Mm-hmm. So those are really important, even to find things that you didn't know. You're thinking to yourself, all I got to do is change the oil, and get some new tires set up for next event, and then you find out that your subframe is cracked or something like that. And you only find that by getting down there and actually looking, and you try and catch something before it gets worse. So, but it's
you got to find the process that works for you. And as much as I'd love to say that we're very diligent about, like, as soon as the car comes back from an event, immediately going through it, we basically do the same thing. We sometimes you just even leave it in the trailer for a week and just like have to mentally catch up with everything else that we kind of back burner to get the car ready and get out to the event, and then got to get caught up with like real life, and then kind of fold the race car back into things once we have time for it.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a crew, so that every time I came into either a service or came back from an event, the car goes up, everything gets checked in 20 minutes, but it's just me, so it's,
guys, and at our level, the stuff that happens with us, we always think that we'll be ahead of, like, all right, check all the, put a wrench on every nut and bolt on the car. But the thing that always happens is the thing that you never expected. I've been running my car since 2005 now, and I mean, I bring an extra car along too, even with parts, and it's just like, oh, we don't have that still. We still don't have what we need, and then you get into, our level of engineering. We break stuff, at least on the rally stuff, like you could get that car perfect, and then you kind of hit a tree, and
just kind of.
That's interesting. I get to a service, and I'm just shooting the shit with the guys there, and I see a little spot of sunlight on the top of the rear tire. I'm like, that's kind of weird. What's that from? you know, I go through and look at the shock tower like, oh, the strut's not in there anymore. That's it tore the top hat out. Like, hey, how many zip ties do we have?
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, oh, let's see if we can zip tie the suspension back. So let's put 100 zip ties and tie it to the roll cage and run a 30-mile stage through the Grand Canyon with zip ties holding the left rear suspension on it. We somehow made it, but it's stuff like that. I laugh, like, I can't even take into account. I think my preparations at this point too, like, yeah, it's kind of like Tasso said, you know, you do the best and you got life and everything else, but then you almost need to have that hat where you know how to have ingenuity with wherever you're at. Like, sweet, we crashed here, we have a rock, a fence, and a zip tie, right? We got to drive the rest of the road.
Yeah. How can we form this into a leaf spring? Like,
and you're doing all that, and you got to figure out how to keep yourself fed, keep yourself hydrated, make sure the car gets fueled before the next stage as well. You know, you don't have a team cook there handing you a sandwich and an electrolyte drink or something like that.
Yeah.
You got to figure out whether you need water more than the radiator needs water, and which one of you takes precedent, which one of you is going to last longer without it.
Yep.
And, you know, stuff like that. And I mean, you said it too, and it's totally right. You know, we feel like we have a mental list of things we want to get to, but you're never going to get all those things done before that race weekend for one reason or another. You know, there's always, you know, even right now I'm thinking to myself, you know, that snowcross got pushed back another weekend. So that I am going to make it. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, the car is pretty good. Oh, no, wait, I meant to do this. And then I'll get that done. Like, oh, no, wait, that's right. You know, I meant to go in here and do this, whatever other thing too. And there's always one more, and I don't know. In a race car, we've said it before, a race car is never done. The project is never done. It's just a loop.
Yeah.
It's a loop, exactly, right? So
Vicious loop.
Yeah, it's a vicious loop. And for us, it's time that goes against us too, because then you do that thing like, oh, I need to replace that hose. And then it's 5 years later, like, oh, crap, that same new hose broke again. I thought this was new. Right?
Yeah.
Like your fuel cell, right? It's like, oh, man. And it just keeps going across the line. Wow, we didn't change that one little hose down there. And we lost the event because of that one little hose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's a surefire way to know that a part's not going to break is to bring spares for it.
Yes. That is Murphy's Law.
Those won't break. Just the stuff that you forget breaks.
That's right.
Exactly. So I carry a ton of spares now just because it's all stuff that has broken. I don't want it to break again. So I'll carry a spare drive shaft, even if it doesn't really fit on the car, because that way I know that my little drive shaft totem will keep the drive shaft demons away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I guess the big motivator to try and find the time to go through the car is just, man, it's amazing how many surprises you can find going through a race car. Like, because just like I was saying earlier, with all the shenanigans with our fuel cell, our car was built in 2014. And so now it's like 7 years old, and it turns out that the expected life of that bladder is 10 years, and we're actually getting close to the end of it. Scotty was in there putting in a new fuel pump so we can run E85, and discovered that the line that ran from the fuel pump to the top of the fuel cell was just about to come apart. And it's been sitting there in the fuel cell.
It did come apart. I mean, it had a half-inch hole in it. So I don't know how we made it to the top of Pikes Peak, honestly, because it probably wasn't getting all the gas it needed.
Yeah. And this is a hose that is buried inside the fuel cell, under the foam, that just by happenstance we actually went through. Yeah, it's one of those, like, you want to be prepared, but it's like, unless you're willing to completely disassemble the car and put it all back together again, there's probably stuff that's hiding that you're not going to find until it really lets go. But I mean, it's worth a shot anyway.
Like Victor was saying, you just got to drive 2 cars to the event.
That's right. That's right.
Entire backup.
Awesome. You need to get another Japanese race car that's identical and just keep one in the trailer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Supposedly, Ryan, they made 2, so get the other one.
Yeah, get the orange one. It's in Florida.
Keep the RC car around.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, trust me, I'm trying to find one right now. And I'm not even in that big into RC cars, but now I really am, all of a sudden, just like that.
It's weird how that happens.
Yeah.
It's funny we're talking. I just remembered another thing that I keep forgetting.
Oh, about the car?
There we go. Yeah. Just I need belts. Belts.
Yeah.
It
Oil
is always
changes.
something. Oil
I got a
changes.
trash
changes
bag
when you
full
get
of
back
belts
too,
if you
right?
want some of them. They're expired though.
Oh, seat belts.
Yeah. That's the
But
problem.
yeah, changing that engine oil when you get back, I think is big. I don't know how many times I've seen it where guys will drain the oil before a race, put fresh oil in it, and it's just like a glitter bomb went off in there. It's kind of nice to maybe have like a lead out on that too. Yeah. I think it's gotten me before too. And even when we're changing the oil just recently, prepping for this event, we changed the oil before the event, and then saw some light brass in it. And we changed the oil the day that we had the oil cooler issue. Changed the oil again then, and then still saw some of it. And I really want to see, like, is this like a new engine breaking in, or is this an old engine giving out? And so that's kind of a good thing to do too when you get back and everything's still fresh, So when you have time, so that way you have time to make those purchases and such.
Yeah. So I guess the ideal is go through the car as much as you can when you get back, but realistically, carry as many spare parts totems as you can fit in your trailer, and just be loose and ready to improvise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever your given superstition is, just don't give up on it. Cross your fingers. Carry a voodoo doll.
Always have
underwear.
Roll of duct tape and zip ties. As long as you have a roll of duct tape and zip ties, you have a shot, whatever it is. Hey, we just shot a rod out the top of the block. Okay, well, how many zip ties do we have? Can we zip tie the piston to the crank? Is that even possible?
One of the motors I blew up at a hill climb. It was a rod through the top of the block. Car lit on fire and everything. Right, it was a good time. I'm sitting there on the side of the course near a corner worker, and the corner worker had his kid there with him. The kid walks up, and so he says, "Hey, I think your car's leaking oil." I'm like, "Yeah, it's leaking oil pretty bad." Obviously, I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh yeah, it has a hole in the motor."
Yeah.
And the kid goes, "Do you have spare oil in your pit?" I'm like, yeah, but I don't know.
Place to start.
That's gonna do it.
Good. Hey, at least he's thinking about it.
That's right.
These are good.
Thinking.
Good
Maybe
for a kid to understand.
Maybe.
I'm looking in the background, and Victor's got like a whole 5-gallon jug of Rotella. Every Subaru fanboy's favorite.
Yep.
That's for my shit box Outback outside.
Yes.
You
got to feed the Subaru.
3 cylinders, so I maybe could have put oil in it. JB welded the block. Yeah. Maybe.
That kid he's a burgeoning rally driver.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny on the totems though, guys. I think my piece for Pikes Peak. So my first year, I did all the practice, and on the last day of practice, the steering linkage came apart. And so right before Boulder Park, we're transitioned from dirt to tarmac. At one point, there's no steering. It became like a PlayStation game, and it just went off the side of the road, and we kind of crashed. We did two rotations in the air. It was fun. But that bit about the totems, like, I went through that whole experience, and I was like, man, what caused the crash? And I was like, I know what caused the crash. I took 2 rocks from Pikes Peak, right? I took them, I'm going to keep these with me. Mm-hmm. Guys, the next year, I brought those 2 rocks back, and I left them at Pikes Peak. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I have pissed you off. I will never do that again. Here's the rocks back. I worship you.
Yes. Do not offend the spirits.
I still have an event where I've never made it through the Monarch Hill climb without mechanical failures of some sort. Not a single time. It's been fuel starvation issues. It's been a blown up motor. It's been coil packs going bad. It's always been something. There's always been something wrong at this event, and we'll go there twice this year. It's on the schedule twice. And so
that's a lot of engines, bud.
I'm trying to figure out what I got to do to make it through those weekends.
You need to bring a spare car.
Just take every superstition that's out there in the world, like the mining superstitions, the oil field. I'm sure there's some like crocheting superstitions. Just get all those superstitions and take into account. So like no cherry pies, no whistling in your car. Make sure you wear a thimble. Like just You just gotta respect
Yeah,
all
Just
of them.
stack it up.
Yeah.
I don't win races when I have a mustache, so I don't race with a mustache anymore. So
That actually
I don't
makes
know,
sense
man.
though, because that's more drag.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how much luck do you think is in this thing still? I mean, I haven't caught on fire
Well,
yet.
maybe that's what it is. I gotta cut off your beard and bring it with me.
No!
Oh man.
Yes.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yep. Whatever works, right? Whatever works.
Uh-huh. Winning's winning.
Yeah. So maybe the answer is just don't offend the spirits. That's really what it comes down to. That's how you prep for the next race.
They don't discuss this stuff on other racing podcasts.
This is the real deal. This is the
Right.
stuff that the pros use right here.
People tuned in
These are
wondering what
secrets.
kind of oil to get for their vape pen, and we're telling them to do superstitious stuff.
Man.
Yeah. Bring sandwiches from the Tommy Knockers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Boy, well that's maybe that means that that we should kind of wrap this up and not give anybody else any more superstitions that they have to honor to be successful in racing.
All right.
Oh, I just had another idea, and I want to put this out there because they were super helpful. And sometimes you just need to know somebody who's got a full trailer full of parts. And in this case, I do want to give a shout out to JJ at IAG Performance.
Sure.
You know, me and JJ haven't had we've had a little bit of a rocky history, much like Victor's rock history. But when I really needed help, I mean, those dudes, they busted out the welder. They cut off and fixed our thing for me right there on the spot. And all I had to do at the time was sign autographs. So a lot of love. So always want to have a guy who has a trailer, who has all of your spare part totems. And even that's helpful.
Yes. Bring a guy that has a trailer and a welder.
Yeah.
Yes. That will at least give you a good shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what broke? What did they fix?
So on the oil cooler, had like the two stems that come off the oil cooler and had the GIC fittings on the end of it. We just had those, or the AN fittings. We just had those capped because the radiator was bad. So we were running like my backup radiator for my blue car. And I guess there was just enough weight probably from hitting the rumble strips or something that right where that little support was for those two little things, it just got a hairline crack in one of them. So they basically cut it flush for us and then welded that bracket, and it's just an O-ring fitment. So we just bolted it back on, and that fixed our oil leak. I mean, we weren't really using the oil cooler side of it anyway, so it was actually super helpful. And I mean, and JJ was like, yeah, man, absolutely. How much time? He's like, give me 30 minutes. And I mean, they took it down to my garage, and it was all installed. The car was ready to go even before I was done giving kids stickers and signing autographs. Like, that was super cool of them. So
Very cool.
mad props to that.
Yeah. Big thanks
Nice.
to IG for that for sure.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, guys, thanks very much for making the time. Victor, thanks for joining us this time. We'll have to sit down to do this again. We need to talk about your excursion actually in Japan, ironically, or not ironically. So that is something that we will have to talk about here soon. But
There was a fun little adventure to be had out there.
yes, it's like the reverse of DSX experience. Yeah.
Bring a NASCAR out there.
That's right. Maybe next time. Yeah. Well, thanks to everybody who's watching, stuck around to the end. Really appreciate it. Thanks you guys for your support. And I guess we'll end it here. And I'll just say, until next time, stay tuned.
Laters, guys. Good to see
See
you
ya.
all.